On this Tuesday, May the 3rd, 2022, 7 o'clock. Charlotte, may you please call the roll?
Dr. Chang,
Present.
Mr. Goldman,
Here.
Dr. Harris,
Here.
Ms. Nezzarella,
Present.
Ms. Poland,
Here.
Dr. Steinberg,
Here.
Dr. Thomas Farquharson,
Here.
Student Representative Andrew Maglio,
Present.
Student Representative Avery Woods Weber.
Here. Thank you. Andrew, may you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? We do not have a revision to the agenda order, and we now will go to Superintendent's presentation, where we will receive presentation of the finalists for the West Hartford Board of Education Teacher of the Year.
Okay, thank you. This is the first meeting in May every year. We announce our Teacher of the Year finalists for West Hartford Public Schools, which we know is an achievement. We have a standard we try to set when we decide whether to grant tenure to a teacher. We meet and we talk about, does that teacher exhibit excellence or the potential for excellence to be in the top 10% of teachers across the field? And, with this being Teacher Appreciation Week, I'd be remiss in not saying thank you to all of our teachers. And I think our three nominees tonight would be the first to tell you they are proud to represent so many fantastic West Hartford educators who are deserving of these accolades and this honor. So the Teacher of the Year process is rigorous and begins with nominations from other teachers. Nominees submit a resume, an essay, and recommendations. Finalists then have a lesson videotaped, and the final three are then formally interviewed by the Teacher of the Year committee. I would point out this Teacher of the Year committee is by their colleagues. This isn't central office at all. I get notified who the three finalists are remarkably close to tonight. So I haven't seen any of them till just in the hallway, which very excited though. I know just how skilled these three finalists are. So if they would come up, Troy Jones, Michelle Haggerty, and Alana Goldberg. All right, I'm going to start with Alana. Since January of 1998, Alana has been a speech and language pathologist at Charter Oak Elementary School. She has also provided services at Whiting Lane, King Philip, and Hall High School during her years with West Hartford Public Schools. I know Alana well as she has served on the Superintendent's Advisory for years and has been just a tremendous voice, not just for Charter Oak staff, but for what's right in our community, and isn't afraid to tell me what's right, which is something I greatly appreciate from Alana. So it is with great pride that I give you this as one of our three finalists. Congratulations. Michelle Haggerty. Since August of 2000, Michelle has been an elementary classroom teacher at Smith School and currently first grade. And she's a teacher that exemplifies the "it takes a village" philosophy to education. You ask anybody at Smith about Michelle, they will tell you that she is ingrained not just in her children's life, but in the whole Smith community's life. And what I really appreciate is she forms partnerships not just with those children in her classroom, but with the families of those children, and exemplifies that belief that it takes all of us coming together, not just to raise our children, but to educate them and to make them who we want them to believe. So, Michelle, thank you so much. Now, finally, this is one that I've known the longest. We pretend over time that we change from who we are at 15, 16, 17 years old. I knew Troy as a student at Conard during that time when I taught, and he is the exact same lively, ebullient, happy presence who goes down the hall and you know when he's there, just as you did when he was 16. And he's a leader, and he is one of our great PE teachers. Since August of 2002, he has taught PE in West Hartford at King Philip and at Bristow, and we're so lucky to have him as a teacher. I'm lucky to have him as a colleague. I also should point out, if you go deep into records, and as one of the few people that's been here a long time, I contend, so I do have this institutional memory, Troy still holds the record for the 5,000 meters at Conard High School. 16 minutes, 5 seconds.
I think Gavin Sherry would argue with
Think
that.
you're breaking this? Think you're breaking the 16 mark now?
I'm not sure.
But it's with great pride that I present this to Troy. Thank you. Appreciate it. So congratulations to all, and at the end of the month, this will be announced who West Hartford's Teacher of the Year is, and they'll move on to the state and then the National Teacher of the Year competition. But really, I mean it, all three this year are so deserving, so congratulations. Thanks.
Tom, can I say something for 1 second?
You can.
All right. So I just asked Tom if I could steal a second. So I would like to say, professionally and personally, I want to take this moment just to thank and congratulate Tom Moore for everything that he's done for our district. So I know we're on a clock, I'm sorry. I just feel it's this important to me. So as many of you know, Tom's been a resident in West Hartford, a teacher in West Hartford, and obviously most recently an incredible superintendent. It's a challenging position to be in. We joked a couple of years ago about it being similar to a place kicker in the game of football. Right, coming in to win the game, if you make the field goal, you make the right decision with your team, it's like, okay, well, that was expected. But if you miss and you make a wrong decision, hoopla, right? So, Tom, I just want to say you're going to be greatly missed. I know that superintendents around West Hartford turn to West Hartford to find out what we're doing when important decisions need to be made. And they look to Tom Moore to see what is West Hartford doing, and then making a decision to represent their district. So, Tom, I wish you the best professionally and certainly personally, but we appreciate you. Thank you.
All right, well said and wonderful, and many congratulations again to Alana, Michelle, and Troy. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And so with that, we will now transition to our public communications. This is an opportunity where we're able to hear from you, your thoughts, your suggestions, your concerns. Each person has 3 minutes to speak, and there are up to 21 minutes per subject matter. As you are speaking, you will see Charlotte, who will hold up a card, a yellow card that is, when you are down to 1 minute in your time. And when your time has expired, you will see a red card, and we ask at that time for you please to respectfully take your seat. We very much want to hear and are attentively listening to what you are saying, but it is policy that we do not respond to comments as they are being made. And when you come to the podium, please do share your name and your address. And want to say this with great emphasis. As much as we want to hear what you have to say, we are respectfully listening. We ask that your words are delivered in a respectful way also. That not only is for those speaking at the podium, but those that are listening in the audience. We do have a list here, and again, we said there are 21 minutes per subject matter. If we do get to the 21 minutes mark, we do have public comments at the end of the meeting, and we certainly welcome you to make your comments at that point in time as well. First, we have Graham Brown.
Good evening, everyone. Graham Brown from 243 Steel Road. So, like I said about a month ago, this is a very jarring, emotional subject of SEL, and I know that there are some people here who have just come to listen to what people have to say, so if you're not familiar with what we're talking about when we say SEL, there is a portion of SEL that is a gender identity curriculum involving a series of books from kindergarten all the way up to 5th grade that talk about and introduce the ideas of changing gender, changing sex. And I know, well, like I said last time, there's a lot of people who feel strongly on both sides. And so I say this not in an entirely joking way, but I think it's easy to say this is probably the most controversial subject that's coming across the Board of Ed. And yet, the funny part is that we could actually very simply solve this issue by giving both sides what they want. Right now, currently, the SEL gender identity curriculum is listed under civics. Everything about your personal identity, it directly relates to your physical, emotional, and mental health. That should be moved over back into health. And parents that have objections to it should have the ability to opt out of it. Parents who are okay with it should be fine with their kids still having that that instruction in school and reading those books. I really think we could just end this whole discussion about it. It's going on for several weeks. It's going to keep going on. It's only going to get bigger. And it's causing some division. And I think by doing so, as a board, if you guys were to step in, honestly, and allow parents the option to do that, you would instill so much trust that we've started to lose between the parents and the Board of Ed and the West Hartford Public School District in general. I think that's really important for long-term success in West Hartford. West Hartford has always led the way when it comes to education. Let's lead the way when it comes to showing that we're willing to meet parents where they're at and showing that we respect different views, whether we agree with them personally or not. And let's give parents a voice. Let's let them have an option in this. Now, the only thing I will say one last time is that the SEL gender identity curriculum should be moved from civics into health so that parents can have an option. And that's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Rebecca Seaton.
I'm Rebecca Seaton. I live at 87 Hunter Drive. As a parent, it's my responsibility to be aware and informed about my children's education. I talk with them, read school communications, and reach out to their teachers when I have questions. I also exchange information with other parents. What I do not do is intentionally spread misinformation, because that would be teaching my kids to lie. For instance, if I said that our elementary social emotional curriculum teaches sex education, I would be spreading a lie. If I said students being taught U.S. history from racially inclusive perspectives was critical race theory, that would also be a lie. If I said social emotional learning and social justice instruction was taking the place of reading, writing, and math, that would be another lie. Instead of talking about things that aren't happening, I want to talk about what is happening, because our district believes that every child deserves to feel they belong in our community. First, a note that I teach young children. They notice differences. As early as ages 4 and 5, children can show positive and negative biases about differences related to race and gender. Talking about human diversity with children doesn't cause these biases and prejudices. Children learn prejudice from prejudice. And how people in their world respond to differences is what teaches bias and fear. When they don't have age-appropriate information about human differences in gender, race, culture, and ability, they fill a vacuum of understanding with confusion, misinformation, and other people's biases. If a path to becoming empathetic, critically thinking, and resilient adults can be derailed starting as early as preschool, we need schools to equip children with the tools and skills to address this. Social, emotional, and social justice learning promotes kindness and fosters empathy, and it teaches children to understand how someone else's experience of mistreatment is a harm that should be confronted and prevented. For this, every child needs to develop positive personal and social identities, to gain comfort and joy with human diversity, to recognize unfairness and understand that it hurts, and grow confidence to stand up for oneself and for others against discrimination. I am so glad we live in a school district that recognizes this. Thank you to the board members, district and school leaders, and teachers who support and implement this instruction with integrity and reflection. Thank you to parents and community groups who affirm and challenge this work to make it more inclusive and transparent. And to students who learn about themselves and each other together every day, you are on your way to becoming empathetic, critically thinking, and resilient adults. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Scott Zweig.
Scottswag, 19 Claybar Drive. First, I would like to welcome our esteemed guest, Chief Richard Velke from the Connecticut Tribal Nation. You guys are using up my time. I'm grateful that you're able to join us here tonight to share your position on our town's use of the names warrior and chieftain. It is truly an honor. I would also like to thank the board for inviting Chief Velke here tonight. A representative of one of Connecticut's 5 tribal nations, his input is critical to this issue. Of all the voices in this room, including mine, his matters the most. I hope that each of you will listen with open minds to what he has to say. Much has been said about the lack of a fair and transparent process in reviewing and voting on the decision to change our honored and cherished team names. Well, I'm going to say a little more. Public Act 21-2 became effective on July 1st, 2021. Yet for some reason, the issue of our team names was not raised during public meetings in September, October, or November. Instead, Superintendent Moore sent out letters to Connecticut's 5 Native American tribes asking for input on the names without informing the public that this topic was even under review. After getting no response, the board went ahead and proposed a motion to discontinue the use of these names. What I never understood was why the board waited 159 days from the effective date of the legislation to raise the issue during a town meeting. Why the long delay? Clearly they were thinking about it, given the fact that Superintendent Moore sent out letters on their behalf 2 months earlier. And why was the board so eager to vote on the motion so quickly? Initially, Mr. Chang wanted to hold the vote during the December 7th meeting without so much as a public discussion on the topic. However, after urging by other board members, the vote was delayed a mere 59 days. Again, I ask, why the rush? What's the hurry? Surely if you could wait 159 days to raise the issue, you could have at least waited that long to discuss and consider the topic before voting. The process was flawed from the beginning, but now we have a chance to make it right. I call on the board to delay implementation of the proposed name change for our teams until an appropriate process has been undertaken by the town and the board. Our neighbors in Canton established a formal process. It took 6 months to evaluate the decision, and they kept the name Warrior. Watertown spent an entire year studying the issue, engaging the community through meetings, public forums, a formal 16-member committee before deciding to retire their name Indians and choose Warrior. Do we think we're better than the people of Canton and Watertown? Do we think we know more? I suggest we know less because we spent less time talking about it. I call on the board to delay the implementation and launch a formal process to review the name before the end of next school year, which can be done in compliance with Public Act 21-2 in the 1-year grace period. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Anita.
Well, I guess I'm going to piggyback off of what Scott said because I am here actually on that issue. But more importantly, I think what's most important here.
Pardon me, Anita, your name and address, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. Anita Arakelian, 48 West Normandy Drive. Thank you. So what I want to say is yesterday I sent an email to the entire board. Not only Scott already raised the question of what Public Act 21-2 is, Rebecca Seaton said we have to make sure and ensure that we are very correct and precise. So I, in my email, stated to Dr. Chang, because he is the person who is fighting this the most, that there is a Board of Education policy, 8310. If you make any changes, and this is contradicting 1700, when you decide to make a change, you have to do 2 votes. If we are not a society of following policy, that is your policy that you have to follow ours, then why do you demand our students to follow the rules? It starts from the head, and the head is the Board of Education.
I also want to bring up that there is one other one. It's called Policy 1230, where public complaints are made. And you go through the list and you escalate up. I brought to your attention that my son was targeted. I brought to your attention that I felt that he was being, that there were certain 14th Amendment rights that might be violated. I brought to your attention that the assistant curriculum specialist at the school prevented him from going into the classroom, and she had nothing of, no basis to do it on. And I have brought it to you, and I expect some kind of inquiry, probing, or investigation, because that was a little boy's rights who were violated. And that is a policy. But I also want to respect with what's going on today, and that is we're here for the mascots, but most importantly, we're here for Native Americans. I brought this book to you on February 1st. I hope some of you bought it. I hope some of you read it, but I shall only read two very strong points in it. It's written by Clan Mother Sharan, and she starts with she starts with ancestral reverence. Sego, thank you to all my honorable ancestors, known and unknown. My father, Chief Big Eagle, tribal leader, medicine man. Tom Flanders, tribal spiritual advisor, medicine man. My grandmother, clan mother, chiefess, rising star. Tribal leader, medicine woman. My great-grandfather, George Sherman, Roy Black Bear, medicine man. And Mary and Eliza Freeman, who were African American Indians of the Paugussett Nation, free slaves who had a haven on our tribal nation's land for all the enslaved who had escaped. When she starts with chapter 1, what makes me indigenous? I hope I do her justice in reading this. I was born an American Indian, raised as an American Indian.
Pardon me, your time is up.
You know what, Dr. Farquharson? I think other people have spoken longer, and I think people should hear what is being said, because this isn't my words. This is somebody else's words.
Excuse me, Anita. Anytime the red card has come up, I have spoken to others as well. Please, thank you for your comments. Thank you. Next, we have Lisa King.
Hi, my name is Lisa King. I live at 9 Danforth. When I'm local, I was here before, so I'll remind you that I'm a psychotherapist practicing in Los Angeles, California. I left these packets on at your desks, I guess, from Advocates Protecting Children. You can just peruse them as you want to, or whatever your inclination is. I just wanted you to have them. They were given to me by Maria Keffler, who is the Advocates for Protecting Children. I kind of want to explain how I got to this point where I'm aware and concerned, because many therapists and psychologists and social workers are now concerned about this gender identity issue. Not social emotional learning, just the gender identity portion. Because many kids, so I'm going to tell you, in California, I was working at a high school 3 years ago and also at a community center as a psychotherapist. And in my high school, suddenly, 4 kids within 2 weeks came in and had declared their trans identity and stated they had gender dysphoria. Now, they don't come up with this from nowhere. Somewhere they got it. And at first I was just, so very concerned and empathic and compassionate and nurturing about it. But then I started to get curious, because at the same time at my community center, parents were coming in with or without their kids, alarmed at this sudden trans identity from their children that they didn't suspect, or they just didn't know where it was coming from. So it now does have a term called rapid onset gender dysphoria. So I started to put two and two together, and then I just started really researching what was happening, because I didn't know. And that's when I discovered Abigail Schreier, and I had seen her on YouTube speaking to Hillsdale College, and she has written a book. She lives in Los Angeles, and I'm going to leave this. I only have one. And it says in here, at least read chapters 5 and 6 if you, I mean, I can understand that people don't want to do all this reading, so can I leave it with you? Or I'll just leave it to you. And with the book by Maria Keffler, chapter 1 is probably the most important, just so you know. But so there are many of us getting concerned that kids are being confused by this. They're starting to question when they might not have. They're thinking that they can change at whim, especially, like I said, my population was kids with learning disabilities, autism, ADHD, and so they think they can just change. I can change to a different sex, or I can change back again. And I mean, these are kids in high school. So I just want you to be careful, because I don't know that, of course, we want all our kids to be empathic and understanding and accepting and inclusive, but we don't want to hurt kids. We don't want to be hurting kids to help another. We have to make this work for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Cheryl Starybrat. And Cheryl, I apologize. Please do go. And then Addie, I apologize. I do see you on here. I had the two A's back to back. So after Cheryl goes, Addie, please, would love to hear you. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Starybrat. I live at 122 Mohawk Drive. I'm here to talk in support of SEL, and I just wanted to really quickly go through some of, both my kids are in the West Hartford school system, and the teacher sends out the curriculum every week about what they're going over, and here are some of the topics under SEL. We can greet our classmates by name and in new ways to make everyone feel welcome in our classroom each day. We know how we want to feel in our classroom each day and what we can do to help each other feel that way. I can participate respectfully in the morning meeting and understand why we meet. I can be a respectful learner and use self-talk to limit distractions and keep focused. I will be able to demonstrate assertive communication skills in response to scenarios. Live your dream. Review of SEL, skill breathing, and self-talk. Those are just a couple pointers that have come out through the last couple weeks in the teacher's email. At its core, SEL teaches respect and inclusivity. It shows our children how to be good members of our community and peers to each other. Children and teachers should be encouraged to talk openly about our differences and not shy away from them. There is a myriad of data that shows LGBTQ kids of all ages have lower rates of depression, anxiety, and suicide when they feel accepted and supported by their peers and their adults. Being LGBTQ isn't controversial, and I think it's important that we are able to talk openly and respectfully about this both at home and in conjunction with the school curriculum. There is no harm for our children to learn this, but it can be really harmful if it's shamed and silenced.
Thank you. And now we will have Addie. And thank you for your patience.
No problem. Addie Lorden, 561 Park Road. Earlier this evening, I presented Ms. Hewitt, Mr. Chang, and the Corporate Council with a request for information regarding applications for grants and aid under Public Act 607/1979 through the Office of Public Management, also known as OPM, which many of you will recognize from recent news articles, and the DEP. I included you, Mr. Chang, because you have, in past interviews, alluded to the fact that there is more at stake than what you call the minuscule $27,000 West Hartford will receive in tribal money. Also, despite speaking passionately on the subject of eradicating the names warrior and chieftain because of their detrimental effect on the First Nations people, you voted not to invite tribal leaders. You have spoken of your childhood trips to the reservations in California, but you have not mentioned speaking to tribal leaders here in Connecticut about West Hartford team names. You speak for, but do not want to speak to or listen to our Indigenous people. I find both a little odd. Perhaps you have some knowledge on the whole bond award of $3 million for sport facilities through the DEP, not the Department of Education, the DEEP, just as Senator Austin pushed mascot bill through in a budget vote. In 2015, images were removed, in part based on then Conard High School history teacher Tracy Wilson's public comments. Now the current town historian, who again gave public comment on February 1st, 2022, of first-hand knowledge that tribal leaders wanted the names gone, never mentioned in the interim 7 years of what she did to fight for or produce a Native American curriculum as promised by her and WHPS. Ms. Wilson is the wife of state legislator Beth Bai, who was and is very involved in education as the current commissioner of the state's Office of Early Education, and whose house, Mr. Chang, you have visited. Gareth Bai is on the Bond Commission Committee. Senator Austin's press secretary announces the award of $3 million to West Hartford for new facilities shortly after Moody Investor Services increases the town's rating, a first in 20 years, on March 30th, 2022. This means the potential for a great payday for West Hartford, as already seen when the bonds passed on March 31st, 2022. The fastest approval ever, according to Governor Ned Lamont. And Senator Austin is tipped to be the next Democratic runner for governor. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Ariella Alray. Please pardon if I mispronounced your name.
Ariella Alroy, 1930 Boulevard. I just wanted to speak very briefly in support of the SEL curriculum. I think that we live in such a diverse and globalized world, and people are really expected to know how to treat each other with dignity and respect and speak to each other in an inclusive way. And if we weren't teaching students how to do that in their real life, they would be very compromised, I think, in their futures. It's such an important thing to know how to be inclusive and how to be respectful to everyone with different backgrounds, orientations, identities, and abilities. Learning about differences does not make you different. And being exposed to curriculum that includes gender identity, it doesn't create a trans child. It just doesn't. I know from personal experience, if my sister is a lesbian, and if heterosexual content was able to influence her, it absolutely would have. She would not be gay. She was surrounded by it and very silenced in her personal identity, and that did not change her, and it will not change other students. It is simply giving them the tools to talk to each other and everyone else in their lives with respect. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Katie Capes.
Hi, my name is Kate Kappas. This is a pilot year in which West Hartford teachers are using the Devereaux Student Strengths Assessment,
Kate,
or
pardon me, please.
DESA.
Your address, please.
Legally, I don't have to give my address. I reached out to Deb, and it is not required legally. Your lawyers themselves told Deb. Deb communicated to me, I do not have to tell you my address. It is on file. It is in my children's files. This is a pilot year in which West Hartford teachers are using the Devereaux Student Strengths Assessment, or DESA, a tool to assess students' social and emotional learning. 3 times a year, teachers are required to subjectively assess a student's behaviors using a mini DESA, in which the teacher answers 8 questions about each child's classroom behavior, such as the following. How often did the child do something nice for someone? Speak about positive things. Follow the advice of a trusted adult. Each question is scored on a scale of 0 to 4. 0 being never, and 4 being very frequently. This score is solely based on the teacher's impression of the child. If a child's total score is low, he is labeled in need, and then a full DESA must be completed by the teacher. This can be as many as 72 questions answered about the child by the teacher, such as, how often did the child cope well with insults and mean comments, respect another person's opinion, act as a leader in a peer group? Scores are tallied and broken down into 8 subgroups. Then the scores are recorded on a dashboard called Aperture, where they are stored, tracked, and not necessarily protected. If several of the students' scores in a particular class are deemed in need, the school psychologist pays a visit to the class. Teachers and parents are not notified about this visit. The DESA is similar to a psychological evaluation given by psychologists and psychiatrists. This mental health information is being obtained by teachers who are not trained psychologists or psychiatrists. The information about each child is as sensitive as information gathered in a pediatrician's office. But many parents in West Hartford are unaware that their child is being assessed in this way. Some problems I have with the subjective questions teachers answer about children are, what if the teacher answering the question does not like a particular student or their parents? It happens all the time in West Hartford. What if a child raised to be humble offers acts of kindness without notice? What if the advice offered by a trusted adult defies the morals and values instilled in a child at home? Why would you want a child to follow the advice of an adult very frequently? Unless your goal is compliance, advice should be freely given and freely received. The children should be allowed to make independent decisions and learn from any resulting mistakes. How does this assessment take into account introverted students who are usually quiet and unassuming? Many of the West Hartford elementary schools have not been transparent with families in telling them about this assessment or how the collected data is and will be used. West Hartford needs to let parents know that they can opt out of this psychological evaluation.
Thank you. We have time for one more comment on the subject of SEL, and I will read the next name on the list. If your subject is on that matter, please do come to the podium. Others thereafter, if I do call your name and you wish to speak on the subject of SEL, if you can please reserve your comments at the end of the meeting when we also have public comments. Next, we have Lori Schwartz.
Good evening. My name is Lori Schwartz. I live at 1 Timber Lane. I'm a West Hartford resident. I'm a taxpayer. I'm a former West Hartford school teacher, and I'm a parent. I oppose the use of my tax dollars to support gender education, and I wish to have a few minutes just to tell you why. I feel very strongly that this is a content area for which parents have no provision for exempting their children. This is a very serious concern. When my daughters went through the West Hartford schools, we were able to exempt our children from the sex and health education that conflicted with our morals and values. This was a very important choice for me as a parent who wished to keep my children in the public school. For the gender education, parents are not allowed to exempt their children, and this is a very serious concern. Gender education is a very sensitive area, and it's best addressed within the confines of a family. Families can select doctors, psychologists, support individuals to help them on a path to journey with their children. Gender dysphoria is a very serious matter that parents are dealing with, and they need the school's support in a different way than you wish to offer it. What they need is for you to respect their freedom and their rights to lead their child on a path that is safe for their family. Private family matters were always part of my classroom work for 9 years in West Hartford. Oftentimes, parents would call me with some kind of confidential information regarding their child. Oftentimes, that was because their child's behavior might be different in the classroom. They weren't asking for my opinion on what they should do with their child. They were asking me to watch out and safeguard their child. Likewise, if I heard their child say something in the classroom that reflected a sensitive issue, something that could be a parental concern, I would call the parent and I would share that with the parent, but not with any judgment as to what they should do and not with any agenda of my own to lead them. That's for parental rights. That's not for a school system or a teacher. The second reason why I oppose this education is because gender dysphoria is a moral issue. And whether we want to admit it or not, people have different viewpoints about gender ideology, starting right from the biological issue from which it originates. Parents who are facing this issue are facing a very, very serious concern, and they do not need staff members to lead their child in a direction that disunifies their family. Much division can come in a family, which is the last thing a child needs when they're dealing with a serious issue.
Excuse me, your time is up.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right, thank you. Thank you. The next name I see, Casey, I do see it's on SEL, so if you can please share your comments at the end. And then we have Russell Gardner.
Russell Gardner, 8 Willow Lane. I'm here to provide feedback to the board. Dr. Harris and Mr. Goldman, you do not rush to judgment to promote any personal ideology. In fact, your ideology is all about taking the time needed to explore the facts before voting on an issue. You demonstrate commitment to process. One example is how you wanted to delay the vote for changing the chieftain warrior names. Unfortunately, you were outvoted, but you demonstrated empathy by wanting to hear more from all sides of the issue. You have been open to learning and taking the time to explore issues more deeply. You expressed your concerns honestly and thoughtfully. I thank you for being an example of good government. For the other members of the board, I'm going to start by talking about my first Board of Ed meeting in this past September last year. some of you weren't here, I'm trying to address the prejudice and bigotry that I still see amongst all of you. So if you weren't here during some of the incidents I'm talking about, they're examples. My first Board of Ed meeting was September 21st. For those of you, I'm sorry, there are 4 parents that spoke at that meeting. The second and third parent thoughtfully presented their concerns. One concern was for the students' mental health. Another concern addressed how the superintendent was gaslighting parents. Let's acknowledge that neither issue has ever been addressed by the Board of Ed. Let's also acknowledge that the Board of Ed bullies parents. One example occurred at the same meeting, September 21st. It's on YouTube. Check out the video. The board bullied a woman of color for not wearing a mask. This room was almost empty. There were only 4 parents that spoke. There were a few extra parents as well. The woman was sitting behind me by herself in the very back row. I didn't even know she was there. She had not said one word. She was sitting over 50 feet away from the board. The board stopped the meeting and called the police, only because this woman was not wearing a mask. You authored the whole incident, but there was no apology from the board. Even worse was how the board used the media to send a nasty false message about the meeting. In WeHa News and Hartford Current, there was no response to the second and third parents who spoke, none. Their concerns had never been addressed. The best the board could do was for a board member to use the media to lecture parents about following rules. The superintendent used propaganda to ridicule and disparage the parents at the meeting. The media and Board of Ed elite make every accommodation for the superintendent, while the superintendent weaponizes the media to send out nasty narratives about West Hartford parents. You are responsible for how he conducts himself. The superintendent creates a savvy political narrative that divides our community. The superintendent has been at war with West Hartford parents. All you do is look the other way. You act like a good old boys club, but the fact is the superintendent reports to you. This is unprofessional of you and the superintendent to behave this way. Please stop the jargon, stop being so obtuse, stop the political theater, stop projecting your ideas for social engineering, and stop using our children as guinea pigs for your personal ideology.
Thank you. Next, I see Getchen, I believe, but it also is on SEL, so if you can please reserve your comments for the end of the meeting, because we've reached our max. And I see David and Ella Goldberg. I'm not sure what topic. If it's on SEL, if you can please reserve your comments. If it's on another subject matter, please feel free to come to the podium. All right, and then Ann Beers, I believe. I also see it's on SEL, so if you please can reserve your comments for the end of the meeting. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to make a comment on another subject matter? Please do come to the podium.
Good evening. India Liddell, 26 Fernwood Road. I am picking up where Anita Arakalian left off. Again, the book by Clan Mother Sharan. What makes me indigenous? I was born an American Indian, raised as an American Indian, live and still continue to live as an American Indian, and I will die an American Indian. Since the day I was born, being raised at my father's knee taught me the ways of the American Indian and how to live for tribal and cultural survival, to preserve the arts and crafts that are real, authentic, and handmade by our tribe and other tribes, and to preserve the culture and the traditions to defend and protect ancient property, rights, and lands. Tribes have a chain of command that consists of clan mother, tribal leader, whose position is higher than the chiefs and the chiefesses, chief and co-chief, war, peace chief, and/or council chief, and the tribal chairman. These are the areas that Anita wanted you to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Yes, please come to the podium.
Thank you. I'm Mark Greenstein of 2 Cross Hill Road. And the subject really is unity, which I think West Hartford could do on 2 of the big issues here. As a district, a mascot, if we could affirm, a human mascot is someone you're proud of. That's why schools and teams name them after someone prideful. I mean, look at the NFL. Steelers, Rangers, Patriots, Chargers, Cowboys. My favorite, 49ers. Actually, my favorite is the Whalers. We missed them. Intent matters in the naming of a mascot. And though I wasn't around when warriors and chieftains were named, I'm certain that the intent of those who chose those names was to choose something good, not something denigrating. So, and this is the kind of affirmation that I think West Hartford could take and unify. And whether the town decides to keep the names associated with Native Americans or not, if we can affirm that there is pride behind it, this is good. And here's why, of all places, this town can affirm it. We have a school named for a Native American. That would be King Philip. I went there. When I went there for grades K through 5, I always thought it was for some French king. Okay, that was Philip. It was for a Native American, and he wasn't even a good guy. Okay, he killed a lot of colonial British American settlers. Yet we had the temerity to say there's something prideful about the area and this one warrior, yes, and chieftain. And we have a school still named after him. When we can affirm that there's goodness to that, it adds unity. I got one quickie on unity too, and that is, and Dr. Moore, I've written to you about this. Boy, if you could just take sex ed out of education. You got good parents here. You have therapists here. Kids can learn outside of the 8 a.m. to 2:30 school and instead be learning math and English and science the way we used to. It would take away... It would take away the animosity that you're seeing a little of here. It's just going to get worse. And it's going to be parents against parents and parents against you. And if West Hartford can be a district...
I respect but you're shifting into another subject matter that we have put on pause until...
All right. Think unity. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right. Okay, sir, to the podium.
Actually, my name is Getch, 56 Gillette Street. I wasn't prepared on this one, but it bothers me all the time when I think about it. It is about CRT, critical race theory. It is about race, I guess, and it has been taught around American school all over the country. And it says, it promotes that the white man is a racist and the black people and other minorities are inherently or systematically subjugated or something. Racism is imposed upon them. So I always been fascinated by history as a historian, and the black race has been subjugated for thousands and thousands of years, starting with the Arabs when they went to Africa in the 7th century. And for thousands of years, until the late 15th, when European came, over 147 million Africans were shipped off to the east. And only about 12.3 or 5 million came over to the west. And out of that, for 12,500,000 slaves who came to America, only 480,000 ended up in the North America. So that's about 3.8%. The rest went to Brazil and Haiti and Jamaica and other South Americas. So once the 0.3% came over here, at least, there is no, I can't compare between slavery and Eastern slavery and Western slavery, but they are both brutal. But at least those who came over to here, they kept their balls. So their balls are not removed, like the Arabs are doing to the Africans. So those who came over here were some of them are mistreated, unfortunately, which is bad history. But most of them are helped because I wanted to tell you, one country in Africa called Liberia was a jungle forest. And it was the white man of America who in 1822 brought them back to Africa to give them space. They were slaves here. So these people were taken to Africa, and they wanted to buy a place for them in Senegal, and the chief of Senegal refused them. And then these white men, all of them, 12 of them are whites, and then they persuaded another chief in the land of, it wasn't called Liberia by then, and then they were brought to Liberia. Today, Liberia is a free state. It was a black free state. Its capital city is Monrovia, after Republican President James Monroe. So when it is because of the white men they were free.
Sir, your time is up.
Okay, so I don't buy this narrative of CRT. So it is evil, divisive, so it should stop. Thank you.
Thank you. I see a hand raised for a comment. Yes, please come to the podium.
Good evening. My name is Mary Nagy. I'm from 43 Acadia Street, and I don't have any comments prepared, but I'd like to continue a little bit about what Getch was saying, and I'd like to reference two books for you to continue that particular vein of information. One, the book title is, quote, White Cargo, unquote. I don't have the author's name, I'm sorry. And another is How the Irish Saved Civilization by Thomas Cahill. I would just speak from a second-generation Irish person, I'm Hungarian as well, is that the Irish people, being Caucasian or white, were also enslaved and shipped in many places. I think that each people's ethnic and cultural history has this phenomena of oppression. The second thing I want to speak to is the fact that the Native American culture are people that lived here before any of us immigrated here. There might only be one or two, I really don't know. People themselves might not know what their ethnic history is without doing a DNA test. But I would just say, being a New Englander, and I've lived other places in the nation and abroad, but being a New Englander and a West Hartfordite and a Simsburyite, is that we did have certain tribal nations here. And myself, I'm 67 years old, I'll be 68 years old. I really didn't respect or understand the American Native tribal history. I didn't begin learning it or respecting it until about 5 or 6 years ago. I started noting names of towns and streets. And as a youth, we used to hike up to King's Philip's Cave. And some of what the gentleman was saying here is sort of incorrect because it comes from a colonialist narrative. But I wouldn't even have contemplated that without my own sustained personal pursuit of knowledge and reflection. Again, I didn't prepare any of these things, but I'm very, very pleased to express gratitude and thanks to the board for re-inviting Chief Velke. I'm very interested to hear everything that Chief has to say. And I'm a little bit out of shape right now, but I've done a lot of athletic work in the past, so I really respect human tribal mascot names. And one of my personal achievements as an athlete is having climbed Squaw Peak in Phoenix, Arizona. And it was really one of my life events. Thank you. We'll just say that if there are more mascot names entertained for female teams, Squaw might be something they could look at. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. I'll do one final call for comments. All right, we will pause on public comments, and again, we do offer the opportunity at the end of the meeting as well. We now will move on to unfinished business, which we do not have any of, but we do have new business. Discussion with Connecticut's Native American tribal nations. And the recommendation was that the Board of Education take input from and has the opportunity to ask questions of representatives from Connecticut's native tribal nations. And so before we call our guest to the table here, just want to share with all of you the invitation, or rather the email that was sent to all of the 5 local tribal nations. Again, this was in response to our meeting from the last meeting that we had, and from that an invitation was sent to the Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Nation, Golden Hill Pocasset Tribal Nation, Eastern Pequot Tribal Nation, Mohegan Tribal Nation, and Schaghticoke Tribal Nation. And the invitation read as follows: Dear, to whomever it may have been to, I hope this email finds you well. On behalf of the West Hartford Board of Education, we extend an invitation to you or one of your representatives to participate in our next Board of Education meeting on Tuesday, May the 3rd at 7 p.m., located at the West Hartford Town Hall, room 314. During our most recent Board of Education meeting, a motion was raised and passed requesting to invite the 5 tribal nations to attend the first BOE meeting in May to hear thoughts specifically as it relates to the school mascot matter. With hopeful anticipation you're able to attend, you and other tribal nation leaders or representatives will be on the agenda to share your thoughts and engage with Board of Ed members through discussion. As you may recall, the subject of school mascots within our district dates back to 2015. Although at the time a decision was made to keep the names and remove the logos, discussion about the names remained within the community over the years. In October of 2021, our district reached out to the 5 tribal nations in Connecticut seeking their input. You may recall having received a letter from us. The tribal nations contacted were Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Nation, Golden Hill, Pawcatuck Eastern Pequot, Mohegan Tribal Council, and Schaghticoke Tribal Nation. Prior to the board voting on the mascot in February, we received responses from 3 tribal nations, as well as having previously received a response in 2015 from the National Congress of American Indians. All of this information is available for public viewing on our website. After receiving responses from several tribal nations, coupled with feedback from students and the community, our board voted during the February 1st, 2022 Board of Education meeting to select new mascot names for both high schools. In addition to feedback received from various entities, the outcome of the vote to select new mascot names was influenced by 2 of our board policies, Policy 1700, School Nicknames and Images, and Policy 1800, Educational Equity. Our work as a school district is continuous and evolving. As we strive to educate and enrich the minds of our youth, your collective voices are edifying and represent the rich Native American history, both past and present, deeply embedded within the fabric of Connecticut. As our district is in the process of selecting new mascot names, we recognize the collective voices of the tribal nations aligns with WHPS's educational equity policy, where we strive to create high-quality curriculum, instruction, and opportunities where the narratives, lived experiences, and perspectives of students from a wide variety of backgrounds are reflected in the curriculum and provide an authentic voice to reflect diversity and inclusion. We welcome your presence at our May 3rd meeting to share words of wisdom with us all. If you or a designee is not available to attend, please consider sharing your voice via an emailed letter or video recording to be read aloud or played during the meeting. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me and contact information was given, warmly and signed off. So that was sent to each of the tribal nations. And we are so glad that we have Chief Velke, who did respond and is here with us today. So Chief Velke, if you please may come to the table. As Chief Velke makes his way, I do want to also share that we did receive a response from the Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Nation. Unfortunately, they had an untimely death this week, so they were unable to have someone to come on their behalf. However, when asked once again if they had comments or something they would like to share, they restated that the position statement that was sent in January, that is what their comment still aligns with. And again, that is available on our website. And then we also did receive a response back from Mohegan Tribal Council. And this was the response that was given. Dr. Thomas Farquharson, thank you for the kind invitation to attend your next Board of Education meeting. The Mohegan Tribe appreciates all the effort your community is putting in to hearing from Native voices about this matter. Mohegan tribal leadership has spoken about this matter numerous times and has been working directly with their neighbors here in Montville. Mohegan leadership was never involved with the drafting of the state legislation, which created deadlines for communities in Connecticut. Nor do they wish to be asked to adjudicate on behalf of all Native American people what is offensive on its face. They have made the decision not to offer any certificates of compliance based on this new Connecticut law and will therefore not be attending. We deeply hope that your community faces this issue with tolerance and understanding that no person or group should be subjected to an environment that allows hate to thrive. So before we continue, sir, do you want to say this is for the tribal nations that were invited? So please, if you can return to your seat.
I feel like he was on trial.
No, that's all right. I already spoke with him prior to and shared with him sitting here, and he expressed no opposition. And this is an engaging discussion. So again, thank you so much, Chief Velke. You are certainly not on trial. This is an opportunity to engage. We want to hear from you. And so thank you so much for your attendance here. And as shared before, we first just want to hear your thoughts on the matter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate being invited here tonight by the West Hartford Board of Education, and I apologize to the community that you're looking at my back still, but this is the position we're in tonight. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but I did not recall receiving your first letter that you sent out in October 21. Not saying it wasn't sent out. If it was, we missed it, and my apologies for it. We normally are responsive one way or the other, just like other tribal nations were this evening to you. So my apologies to that. Yeah, I'm here this evening, and it seems like the communities are changing quite drastically. There was times before where different names were accepted and everybody went about their business, and today there's a lot of pushback, not just on logos, but on names. People are taking them very personally. And I have a great idea what they're going through because that's the way I have lived my life for the last 72 years. Okay, I know what it feels like. But it's funny because it doesn't come from you. It does come from the state, however. It doesn't come from you. And I want to tell you tonight why we supported the use of your warriors and chieftains and why the Scattercook still supports it tonight, even having other tribes step up against it. And for you to understand, I have to give you a little background of my tribal history. We ruled the northwestern corner of the state of Connecticut back in the 1700s and had plenty of land that we were able to live off of by either work or by feeding ourselves. And as the white men encroached on our lands and our reservations, they had taken them away from us. But they did a great thing, the state of Connecticut. They gave us overseers. And these overseers were to protect not just us, but our land from being stolen from us, and we still being recognized by the state. It didn't work out that way. We had some 2,500 acres, and as of today, we have just approximately 400 acres in Scotticook, Kent, Connecticut. That 400 acres is mountainside. If you're a deer, you enjoy it because you need to have them legs to get up and down the hills. But in 1981, the tribe had decided that we were going to fight for our federal recognition. And that's what we set out to do. And in 1981, we sent a letter of intent to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Department of Interior, telling them just that. And it took from 1981 to 1996 before we submitted our first petition. Our first petition consisted of 3 binders, 2,500 pages of documentation. And after the BIA reviewed it, they said that in itself would give the Scotticooks a 90% chance of gaining federal recognition. That was in 1996. What hurt the Scotticook people, and not just us, other tribes too, was gaming. Because gaming became involved. It no longer was, are you a Native American that belonged to this state? It became, does the state want another casino in the state? Because once you become federally recognized, there was no stopping any tribe, then or now, from opening up a gaming facility. It's part of the federal rules. So, and it started out to be a self-sufficient purpose. So the tribal people can go ahead and start providing for themselves, building for themselves, working for themselves, and start developing what they have missed throughout the centuries before that. I don't believe today, as I did then, that it was set out for people to become millionaires. That's what it ended up doing, and unfortunately, that left a bad taste in a lot of citizens here in the state of Connecticut. But we went ahead and submitted our petition, and then we had a technical assistance, and we had our final submission in 2004. In 2003, we submitted it. In 2004, January 29th, they came out, they being the Bureau of Indian Affairs, recognizing the Scotticook people as being a federally recognized tribe. By that point in time, in 2004, what this tribe did was submit over 55,000 pages of documentation and spent over $25 million in order to get it accomplished. That's what it took to gain a federal recognition status. Who did we have against us? We had the state against us. We had the governor against us. We had the 2 senators at that time, Dodd and Lieberman. We had the Attorney General, Richard Blumenthal, who was against us, and we had the 6 delegations, representatives in the state of Connecticut that fought against us. And that wouldn't have been too bad. But see, I was involved with this since day one. And we went and knocked on every one of these representatives' doors, told them what we were doing, told them our plan, showed them our petition, asked if there was anything else that we could possibly share with them, that we'd be more than glad to do so. Everything was fine. They shut the door and said it was all good. Don't worry about it. Good luck. You should be federally recognized. Well, in 2004, we did get it. 3 months later, there wasn't a single representative or senator, and including our governor, that wrote to the Bureau of Indian Affairs saying that we bought our way into federal recognition. Why did we buy our way in? Because we spent over $25 million. That $25 million was all accounted for. An inspector general came in from Washington, D.C. and went over all of our books and found everything was exactly the way it was supposed to be, and that money was spent trying to get our recognition. It was not spent on buying a lobbyist. We had one lobbyist. That's all we had. People didn't believe it. They still don't believe it, but it's the truth. We have one lobbyist, okay? And we needed that because once we get federally recognized, we had to know where we're going to go. We couldn't go back and start studying everything. So in 2005, on Columbus Day, the Bureau of Indian Affairs reversed our decision and gave us a negative because of all the political influence that was going on here in the state of Connecticut. They had hearings being held up on the floor in Washington, D.C. They covered strictly the Schaghticoke Tribal Nation and the Eastern Pequots at that time, because they got denied also along with us. We didn't give up. We tried our best to keep going, but we got beat down. We started back up again in 2009, and we continue today to keep fighting for our federal recognition. What brings us here tonight, for me anyways, I know there was quite a few things on the floor, is the use of the names. This state, in my opinion, tried to hold genocide on my people in Schaghticoke. They tried to erase us, and they are still trying to do that today. So when somebody says to us, are you offended by a symbol? Are you offended by a logo? I'm saying no. What offends me is what happened to us and what continues to happen to us by the state of Connecticut. I had cartoons here from the Kent Tribune back at the time. So speaking Native American Indians, it even has one with Richard Blumenthal and myself, hiding one on one side of the tree, one on the other. A Native American walking the center line because he's intoxicated and the state cop is there with him. These are the things that hurt. Not your logo, not the color of your symbols. The gentleman spoke before. We are honored in one sense that out of all the names that you could choose, you choose to represent Native Americans. Don't disregard that. Don't abuse it. Don't diminish it. And that's what you're doing when you strip it. You should never have come to a decision in this town or any other that if a tribe did not agree with you, that your money was going to be taken from you. It's not a fair way to go about business. What are they going to do it with next? Hispanics? Blacks? You don't have enough on your committee? You don't have enough in your town? Stop it. Don't allow them to do to you what they are doing to us. I've been in this fight. I know what it's like. I know what it's like to be outnumbered. I know what it's like to be offended. And I know what it's like to stand up for what's right. I heard some people here tonight standing up for the right things. It's unfortunate the board can't respond, but I have to assume that you heard the same thing I heard. I don't want to tie up the evening on a presentation. I'd be happy to answer some questions. Thank you.
Chief Velke, thank you very much. And again, thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing, and sharing in the way that you did. You informed many and reminded some also, so thank you for that. if it's okay with you, we would like this opportunity for my colleagues to be able to engage with you. This is not an inquiry, so it's not a matter of questioning you. It's a matter of trying to continue the learning process. And possibly through that, maybe there'll be some insight as well in terms of what led us to this position also and those events. But nonetheless, we want to work with your comfort level and have an engaging conversation. And is that all right with you, sir?
Oh, sure, I've been in these seats before.
Well, we think of us all in a circle. We're here just to talk with one another, a conversation. All right?
Okay.
So, colleagues, teammates, comments or questions? Ethan, yes.
Chief Velke, Welke, I'm sorry. Thank you for coming, really appreciate it. I thought it was very interesting. I was particularly interested in your letter because it gave a different insight. And this is past history, and I'm just curious. We used to have imagery as part of the names. Those got taken away. So all it is right now is warrior chieftains, at least for the short term. To you, from what you said, and they're not coming back, but I was just curious, because I thought it was interesting about the heritage being removed. Would those be something you'd want to keep or not keep?
Yes, they would be something I would like to see you entertain and bringing back. I not testified, I'm got the mic in front of me, I apologize. But I gave a presentation in Woodbury, Connecticut, in Nonawag. They had an Indian Chief logo on the gymnasium floor. And I did not know about it until my daughter went to school there. And she had said something, and they brought in a group to speak on Native American issues at that time. And they were gracious enough to remove it from the floor and put it on the wall, not to do away with it. We didn't ask them to do away with it. I would not ask you to do away with it. I don't know if some of you probably went to the schools there and are either chieftains or warriors yourselves and grew up in the community. I would have to ask the community or you, are you doing it to degrade an Indian? Is it a purpose in degrading Native Americans that you have it? Or was it actually for what I believe, you selected the name for? Because, the chieftains, that name and warrior started being used in schools, like in '61. So I think it was a great thing that they were doing. They were recognizing the people that once walked through these lands and was giving them the honor and the privilege of being re-recognized again.
So just to follow up, is there other ways West Hartford can help recognize the Native American culture in addition to the names?
Well, there's 5 state-recognized tribes, there's 2 federally recognized tribes. I can only say when the other 3 tribes are reaching out to be recognized, not being federally recognized, but being recognized by the community, support them. Know that they're there. Know that they've been there all these years and they haven't gone anywhere. Now, I know back in the late 90s, a lot of people's property was being tied up on land claims and everything. We did the same thing in Kent. Okay, but them were the only avenues that we had in order to exercise our rights and to be heard. Because that's the only time, if we didn't do them things, nobody's going to hear what you have to say. What leverage do you have? You don't have any. Do we want to take anybody out of their house, out of their property? No more than I want someone to take me out of mine. But that's the way it has to get to the table for the state and the tribes to work together. If they erased this gaming aspect for Native Americans, these 5 tribes would be federally recognized today. It shouldn't be hanging on a gaming aspect. It should be a legitimate process that you go through. How can we take 21 years that we took to finally get recognized and in 3 months, the state can turn it around. There's 7 criteria in which you need to meet. You don't meet one of them 7 criteria, you don't get recognized. And there's a thorough investigation that goes down. And there's technical assistance meetings that go around. And you're meeting with groups of people constantly and testifying. You know, you get caught in a lie in some of this stuff, you're in trouble. So that's how you could help.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Eva.
Other questions? Deb?
Thank you, and thank you, Chief Velke, for coming to educate us in person this evening. We do truly appreciate it. You know, one of the struggles that that I've been personally wrangling with, and I know a lot of people are, is that while the original intent of certain team names may have been to honor Native American tribes or Native Americans in general, unfortunately, what has tended to happen across the country is what some might consider cultural appropriation by fans showing up in headdresses and other Native American gear, what some might consider mockery in certain, like if you think about the Cleveland Indians and the tomahawk chop that they do in the stadium. And I think, you know, one of the goals is to try to prevent those actions from occurring. So I think that is part of the drive behind eliminating the names, is to eliminate the behavior that tends to be associated with teams that have those names. I'm just wondering if you can help us by sharing some of your thoughts on what you've seen take place in ballparks and other sports stadiums across the country. And whether you think that changing the names of those teams will help to eliminate those actions. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate the question. Thank you. For myself, and I only speak for myself, because just, you know, your board might feel one way, another board's going to feel a different way too. I'm sure I've received mail, okay, for the position I'm taking from other tribes across the nation too. Some good, some not too good, okay? And everybody has the right to their opinion on that. But I can only tell you from what I've known from watching sports all my life. Yeah, you mentioned a tomahawk chop, and it always seemed like they went on the tomahawk chop when they were rooting their team, not when they were mad at him. They wanted them to push on for victory and to keep on going. When the Indian chief got on his horse and rode around after a touchdown, I don't recall cowboys chasing him or anybody in blue suits going after him. Okay, there was no chokehold on him. He was celebrating a touchdown. He was celebrating his team's victory. He was recognizing them and honoring them for what they did in his way of honoring them. Yes, was he a Native American? I don't know. I don't know who was underneath it. Okay, could have been, might not have. But it wasn't done in a disgrace to the tribe. It was done in support of a team. So that my position today, and it always has been. Like I said, I did this back in the 90s, you know, for a school. So, you know, we haven't changed. Probably dug our heels in a little bit more since then for what has happened to us. But, you know, our position here hasn't changed. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your thoughts, and I do recognize you're speaking for yourself and not asking you to speak on behalf of everybody, but really appreciate hearing your opinions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Gail.
Thank you. First of all, I found your presentation very moving and really almost had me in tears. I appreciate you coming here and speaking with us. This has been a very, very divisive issue in our community. And we've had we've been talking about this for a long time. We've had a lot of information. But this is the first time that we've had the opportunity to hear from somebody who's Native American, and I appreciate hearing your thoughts. I want to just be clear that if what I think you're telling us, your perspective, is that you find the names warrior and chieftains to be honorary and not demeaning to Native Americans, and that you would see this as a way of maintaining and honoring the history of the Native American tribes, particularly yours, in our state and in our community, if those names continue to be used.
Well, what I'm saying is, I'm afraid for you not to use them. Not to use them today would maybe seem like a very small thing. We're going to change our names. This way we can keep getting some money from the 2 casinos to help support the town budget. But not to use them today, what are we not going to use 20 years from today? Will the students coming in to the classes at first and second grade even know what Native Americans are any longer? Are they going to know what a warrior was, what a chief is? I did not like the word squaw before, but that's me personally. Okay? Everybody has things that offend them differently, and I think it's all in the presentation. If you're presenting it to offend us, I'm against you. If you're using it as a something that you have used for how many years now in this here town, is your school mascot, don't let others tell you what to do. I'm fighting the fight well against odds on me and my people, but don't let them tell you what to do. We don't let no one tell us what to do neither. If it's right, you stand up for it.
Thank you. So how would you answer the group of people that feels the opposite to what you're saying, that how do we answer that, or how do we understand that when people are telling us that these names are derogatory? Because it's been a sort of a very difficult discussion with listening to both sides. Obviously there are people who feel the names are honorary, but there are also people who feel that they aren't.
Then I would like to see them sit in front of you and explain why, like I am doing tonight. Maybe they can teach me something I don't know too, and maybe I can teach them something they should know. So it's no disrespect meant to my brothers and sisters. And they don't mean disrespect to me, I would hope. But if my fellow tribal members of the other tribes are here tonight, maybe we could have furthered that discussion to one another. I've talked to a few of them, and they seem to have a different position than what their letter says. So I don't know who guides them. Okay, if it's people guiding them, a number of people, or if they're speaking for the tribe on their behalf only, that's what I'm afraid of. If most tribes I talk to, tribal people, yeah, again, no, we don't want to be made fun of. I got cartoons, like I said here, that's really disgraceful. It shouldn't be done to any nationality, any race of people, but yet it's done to us, and it's a slap on the back and a good old boy joke again, So I can only answer it that way, Gail, that if other people were here, maybe we could have had that discussion. I don't know how to answer them other than to say, take another look. Look at what you're saying, what you're doing, and the possibility and the probabilities of erasing what we have being recognized today forever. That would be my plea to them.
Avery, yes.
Hi, thank you so much. I wanted to clarify, or not clarify, I just wanted to ask a question, and please forgive me if this is something that perhaps I should have known. You mentioned that you find the term squaw offensive, and I wanted to ask what makes that term offensive to you versus chieftain or warrior so that we can better understand what representations you do prefer.
Well, the word squaw to a woman, to me, is an insult. Okay? It's not even a prostitute. Okay, it's worse. Right? Language, I don't care to use it at a board meeting like this. That's what makes it offensive to me. The women weren't treated right. They were abused, they were beaten, all right? And that's why they got that name. And that's why I find it offensive. So the other two names, hey, look, you know, Native Americans don't have the corner market on using names warrior and chieftains. Okay, warrior is a fighter. He's a battle. He's a soldier. A chieftain is a leader of his clan. It doesn't necessarily need to be a Native American clan. So we don't have the corner market on all title words like that. It is something that needs to be shared throughout. I know in this instance, because of the logo that you use with it, becomes tied into Native American, okay? But the word itself can't be offensive because it just doesn't pertain. The word squad does.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you for your question, Avery.
Other questions, comments? Claire?
Hi, Chief Velke. It was very helpful to hear your perspective and to understand that there are different points of view. In 2015, when we retired the logo, a commitment was made to incorporate more Native American education into our school system. I'm actually an educator. I taught third grade in West Hartford for 3 years, did the social studies unit. We brought in local tribes. We taught them, students, about the medicine wheel and sand mandalas and drumming circles. You know, it celebrated a lot of the arts. I recently wanted to know what's been happening, you know, since I was a third grade teacher. And would love your input, because I do agree we can't erase, you know, it's important to erase, but as an educator, it's more for us to learn about your culture and to learn about your traditions and to hear the stories of the Native Americans. And we honor them by teaching each generation about the value that the Native Americans brought, and also some of the conflicts that we, as the first, you know, the explorers had. So there's a 5th grade unit that's been developed. It's totally integrated. And every explorer follows with a Native American tribe that was impacted by that explorer. And so that the kids in 5th grade at their reading level are learning about this. So I was curious, and so I met with the superintendent and got a preview, because in November he's going to be giving a full presentation to the board. But I know that the state of Connecticut in January 2023 is releasing some Native American lessons. And it's statewide. It's going to be available for all schools. But as an educator, when someone hands you a curriculum and tells you to plug it in, the teachers always say, what are you going to take off my plate? You can't just add things to the plate without removing. So West Hartford's approach has been integration. So like the folk tales in 1 grade are now not about Paul Bunyan and Johnny Appleseed, but they're Native American folk tales. There's been work with the different tribes in the area to get oral storytelling, because we were told that writing the stories for Native Americans wasn't the most authentic way, that oral storytelling was the best. So I would love to know where else and what else we can do within our grade levels, and what you would recommend so that we are educating our students and teaching them about the rich culture that the Native Americans bring. Because I think that's where we really understand the value of that culture, we honor that culture, and we let those stories, they don't die. They don't get eradicated like you're concerned about, because we're teaching our kids about a very important culture that was here before we white Americans arrived. Do you have any education programs or education ideas that you could share about how we can make our students more aware of the value and the contribution of Native Americans?
Well, as I sit here this evening, I wouldn't have anything obvious, okay? But there is programs that I certainly would love to see you put together, teaching on not just Native Americans themselves, but on the state Native Americans, where they are located, what they have done, the wars that they had fought, the people that they got along with. King Philip was mentioned before, too. You know, I mean, these need to tie into today's tribes to show that they were the same people that went back then. I don't know, about third grade, I remember the only time Indians came up was around Thanksgiving time.
Not in West Hartford. So.
Okay, because either you wore the feathers for the turkey or you wore them in your bonnet. Was one or the other.
So there is a book you might be interested in, and it was co-authored by Ashley Callan, and she there's a whole chapter on all the Native tribes in Connecticut. Your tribe is mentioned, all the regions, all the contributions, and it's available to all students in the state.
Right.
So this book is now at the reading level for the kids, because we always have to make sure it's at the right reading level. But in November, we will be hearing a broader presentation, and it's been hard for me, having taught third grade Native American history within West Hartford, to hear that we don't, because I'm finding out we are, and we continue to improve, and we're looking forward to what the state brings, and we would love to have your contribution as to oral storytelling or anything that would help our students understand more about your tribe.
I believe, if it wasn't, I don't think it was last year because of COVID, but 2 years ago, I testified in front of Senator Olston and supported her bill from K through 12 on introducing Native American stories in a curriculum. So that I supported her on. So.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate your coming and sharing your perspective.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Claire.
Other questions or comments? Jason.
Hello, Chief Velke. Thank you for coming to the board to meet with us. It's an honor to meet you, and you know, I really valued your advocacy for education and Native Studies education here in Connecticut, and you know, this is something that I really wrestle with in how the knowledge that we need to do more, because even though the work that's done in our district may be more than what others do, it's not enough, and we need to develop it more. And I think, you know, for me, thinking through what you've said about the names, to me is, you know, and I think about how we have folks that want to keep the names, but also haven't learned the history, right? And so there's, to me, a kind of disconnect, right? And what other research tells us is that Native mascots can't take the place of curriculum, can't take the place of learning from organized lessons, from primary sources, from hearing from community voices, diverse representations of many different, members of the community, and so, to think through the challenges that your tribal nation has gone through, and that the names of teams that have had Indian references, Native references, didn't help in that struggle for recognition. And to me, I see, there's an educational obstacle to thinking through, how do we expand, how do we do more when we also have to undo the stereotypes and the mythology around Natives in the state, and I'm wondering, how does that strike you in terms of, how do we really expand this, given that many times the names are used, Native names or Native reference names are used to ridicule, and that we've seen that from testimony from parents, from students here, and that goes against our stated policy on equity in the schools. And I want to see the curriculum thrive. And to me, this is one dimension of having the curriculum thrive. And so curious how that strikes you, and if you can help me understand some of those differences.
I wouldn't want you to think for a moment that I am asking you to keep the mascot and symbols and do away with education, as Claire just pointed out, okay? I don't know why what you just said and what she just said couldn't piggyback each other, and you carry them both down the line together, because the education is going to give the understanding of a symbol and the colors that you're using, okay? Both of them got to be mixed together. That's, you leave one behind, forget about it. My answer to that would be, yeah, you marry them together, and the curriculum is 100% right. 100% right. That's why I went up and I advocated for it, with Senator. I think that's a great thing. It's about time, because even in my schools with my children and now my grandchildren, very little is being said in the classrooms on Natives, and it's a shame. And here they are, and they got a grandfather that's the chief or something, and they don't. Hey, Grandpa, how come they don't talk about this? So a symbol is easy to pick up. Pick the symbol up, brings a thought to the mind, brings a question to the mouth. Then it brings it into the curriculum. You're doing both together, I think, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ari, and then Ethan.
Hi, Chief Velke. I want to, again, reiterate what everyone else has already said. I really appreciate you coming and taking the time to educate us and give us some, background and understanding of your experiences. For me, during this mascot debate process, whatever we want to call it. The thing that really struck me at my core, and I'm wondering if you can kind of help me have a better understanding, or kind of help me come to terms with what I'm struggling with in terms of keeping the mascot or making a change, is in this process, we had students reach out to us who felt that the use of these terms were derogatory, where they did. I wish I had the email Andrew had shared with us. There was a Native American student, and this is what just stays with me. And the words expressed and the thoughts expressed in that email, just stay with me. The email said, "Every day I walk into my school with the name Chieftain plastered over my head. I don't feel like I fit in. I don't feel respected." And that really, I think it all comes down to intent versus impact. The intent could be to be a positive, inspiring term, logo, mascot. But I think the part that we're missing, and what that email spoke to me, is the impact that it's having. And that it's not a uniform impact on our students who, I know that there have been numbers passed around, stating 60% of a subgroup of students, not the entire school in either case, but a subgroup had a 60%, preference to maintain the mascots. But that also left 30% of students who said, we don't support this and we want to make a change, and we feel like it would be to our benefit to remove these logos because of the impact that it's having on their personhood, mental health, whatever it might be. So I guess for me, that's really the sticking point for me, is that we have students in our district who are expressing to us the desire to change the mascot name and create a new mascot that everybody can get behind. And while I know that this is a divisive issue among a lot of the adults in our town, it still remains a divisive topic within our student body. And when we talk about unity and we talk about coming together as a town and as a community, that 30%, my thought process was, why not come up with something that everybody can get behind, everybody can feel valued, everybody can identify with on some level, as opposed to creating a situation where 30% of a subgroup of students don't support that.
Excuse me, Chief, before you respond, please, in the audience, please be respectful. If we can hear you up here, that's rather distracting and rude. Please, Chief Velke.
Okay. Well, Harry, my response to that would be, you're never going to get 100% of anything. And I don't think unless we bring the 60s back, them kumbaya days, you're not just going to see them anymore. Everybody seems to be on a fast track. How about this? How about they get off their phones and see if you can do that for class, okay? And see how many percentages of them will sneak that phone call still in, okay? It's not going to work. It won't work for something like that, and it won't work for something like this. I say you have to look back at your town and your history of the name that you've had here for some 50 years, and it's been supportive. Excuse me?
It's 70 years.
Okay, 70 years. And it's been supportive through all that time. It's not just Native Americans and ethnic groups that are going through a tough time right now. The kids are going through a tough time. And this is a storm that we got to weather. And if we're going to, it's not me, you, but if you're going to turn around and start satisfying every 30%, that are against something, you're never going to have a cohesive body working for one. And look, we have the same in my tribe. We're not 100% agreeable on nothing. Matter of fact, it's just me and my wife in the house, and we're not 100%. Okay? So, there's always the divide, but, you work it out and you get through it. I have 51 years.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ethan, and then Gail.
Thank you. What motivated me to be interested to hear what you had to say was in your letter, you talked about worrying about your heritage disappearing. And my question is, and it's following up on the other questions, from your perspective, do you see it as being an enhancement by having the names that will then impact people to the interest? Or, it's sort of a softball question, but I thought it was based on the questions. How do you see that enhancing by having these names to then create the connection, hopefully, with the students?
I think I said it, and I'll say it again. I'm not worried about today. I'm worrying about tomorrow. I'm worrying about 20 years from now. Because if you keep cutting and taking things away, the word Native American you're going to need your curriculum to find out what a Native American is, because it's going to be an obsolete term.
And question is, in the time that you've been doing this, have you seen schools where you've seen, other than the example you gave of your daughter's school where it was on the floor, examples where people have done it in a derogatory way? Or
Yes, I had talked with the town of Derby. They have their logo on the floor. I asked them to remove it and put it on the wall.
Okay.
I gave them the resolution that I shared with your chairman.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on one thing that Ari said, and I'd just be curious what you think. To me, when I hear that, we have students in our district who feel that the word chieftain, makes them feel inferior or negative, and that maybe 30% of the students wanted to change the names, as opposed to something like 65% wanted to keep the names. But if we talk about those 30% and the students in our district that are Native American, I think that it actually, as opposed to reflecting on the students, I think it reflects on us. Because what you're telling us is that these are names of honor and dignity, and somehow students in our district, who are particularly students who are Native Americans, have been made to feel that these are names that are derogatory. So what it says to me, and maybe going a little bit on what you were saying, Claire, is that we could keep these names and also, at the same time, educate our own students as to why these names and your history and your culture are so honorable. And I guess in a certain way, we haven't done that. When a student walks into a school and feels that the word chieftain somehow is demeaning to her, I think we've failed in not being able to educate our students that these are honorable and dignified names, and that there's a tremendous, beautiful history here that somehow has been turned around.
I appreciate that, and I wouldn't want to take any. I appreciate that, and I wouldn't want to take anything away from the student, because I have not walked in her life to see what she has experienced by being a Native American to begin with, what her family has experienced in their livelihood too. I can only speak for mine, and I would hope that if it hurts that bad, that you're not looking to change the name for their purpose, but get some counseling to find out if there's something else that you could be helpful with them, because that's concerning to me. My hearing kids would look up and say, "That's me, baby. You treat me with respect. That's my name up there." Okay, so everybody has a different walk in life, and people need help on different avenues of it. So That's the only advice I can possibly give on that. And I hope, that person does well. Seriously.
Thank you, and out of respect for your time, I'll do one other call for any comments. Other comments? Chief Velke,
If I can just finish up with one thought.
Sure,
I
sure.
would appreciate it. Yeah, I'd like to
And
thank.
after you finish, I just want to share a thought as well, but please, you do go first, yes.
Okay. If I'm going to be finishing up here, I just wanted to thank you and the board for allowing this forum tonight and being able to speak to you and wanting to hear the other side. I wish more towns and cities in the state would take your lead and do exactly that, and then just don't say, this is the way everybody feels. It's not the way everybody feels. I'm willing to sit here with my peers, and if they want to go against me, I'm willing to tell you why they shouldn't. But in my final thoughts, I would say if you already changed the name and doing away with it, I would ask everyone on the board to really reconsider and reestablishing the names that's honored this great town of West Hartford for so many years. Thank you.
Chief Velke, again, sharing the appreciation with colleagues here and our student representatives for your presence here today. It's greatly appreciated. And want to say that although there have been even different opinions here even on our board, one common thread and theme has been our desire to want to learn more and know more, hence your presence here. We certainly know that we have more in our district that we want to do, that we are doing. We certainly know that our intent is not and has never been to erase. It has always been to elevate. Even going back to 2018-19, I believe it was, when we voted to change on our school calendar from Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day for the purpose of wanting to ensure that there is congruency between what's printed and what we're teaching in our classroom, and you got a sense of what is being taught in the classroom. That is what our continued effort and desire is. And so share very much with you your desire for others to want to learn more of your culture, to learn more of the significant historical and presence that your tribe and other tribes have, not only in Connecticut, but in our country as a whole. And I think in terms of elevating the cultural aspects, that is something that certainly resonates well. And I say that with my board hat on and as a human being as well. It is not about erasing. It is about trying to learn more of. And so that is the path that we are striving to go down. And we want to do that collaboratively. So please allow this to be one of future times to engage with you. Again, appreciated your words of wisdom and sharing. And that is something we want to continue to do. But please rest assured, this is just the beginning of us wanting to learn more and expand more the partnership, the collaboration, the presence that you and many other Native Americans have in our country.
Thank you. That was very nice, very kind words. But you brought one issue up that I need to address. That was Columbus and Native American Day. Columbus Day and Native American Day. They want Native American Day to take over Columbus Day, from what I see in legislations, and not just here in Connecticut. That's another one I'm against, okay? Native Americans deserve Native American Day. What day it is, I don't have a day for you right now. Maybe it's Earth Day, okay? But they deserve their own day. Don't pit us against Columbus again, okay? Columbus is recognized by the Italian descent people, and they honor him on that day. And now, I'll tell you what happens in my world is the Italians and Native Americans start bumping heads. Why are you taking my holiday away? Native Americans deserve their own day. So does the Italians with Columbus Day. Don't put us together like that.
I appreciate you saying that and respectfully received. And I'll even take it further. It's more than... I'm sensing that applause was not for me, but I will pause for it to continue. But nonetheless, appreciate what you said very much so, and I'll take it a bit further. It's more than a recognition on one day. It's a matter of recognizing it 365 days a year, not only your culture, but many other cultures as well. Absolutely. So we share that experience, we share that desire. Thank you so much for your time. We do have something for you, a small token of appreciation for you joining us today.
And this is from our board, I guess.
Thank you for your application.
All right, as we continue on, because we certainly have many other pieces that happen in the agenda, our audience tends to shrink at certain points in time, but please certainly do share and stay and learn more. Again, what's happening in our school district. So next we have the ratification of the West Hartford Board of Education professional employees. We have the recommendation that the Board of Education ratify the negotiated agreement between the West Hartford Board of Education professional employees and the Board of Education for the period of July 1, 2021 through June 30th, 2024. And we have Liz, Julio, and Andy here. So thank you so very much. We'll pass it to you.
Good evening, everyone. Before you for approval is a ratified agreement between the Board of Education and the West Hartford Board of Education professional employees. This is a group that consists of 32 employees with a wide range of job titles, such as our benefits specialist, our network administrators, and our registrars. And although all of these have very different responsibilities, they all play a critical role in supporting the day-to-day operations of the West Hartford Public Schools.
Excuse me, Julio, pardon me. I'm just going to close the door part in. Thank you so much. Thank you. Pardon the interruption.
No problem. The Professionals Union ratified this agreement on April 21st. So the contract that you are voting on this evening is a 4-year contract, with the first year being retroactive to July 1, 2021. The contract will call for, in 2021-22 and 22-23, step movement, and steps 1 through 9 will receive a general wage increase of 1.75, and step 10 will receive a 3% general wage increase. For 2023-24 and 24-25, step movement and steps 1 through 9 will receive a general wage of 2%, and a step 10 will receive a 3% general wage increase. Looking at the insurance category, we have increased the employee premium cost share in 2021-22 to 19.5%, and 22-23 to 20%, and 2023-24 to 20.25%, and 2024-25 to 20.5%. In addition, we increased the employee pension contribution 21-22 to 5.75%, in 2022-23 to 6%, and in 2023-24 and in 24-25 to 6.25%. One minor change that I would like to highlight is that we increased the longevity by $200 for those employees with 15 to 19 years of service and those with 20 or more years of service. So that summarizes our agreement. I did want to take a moment to thank all of our professional employees. I can't begin to tell you how impressed I've been with their knowledge, attention to detail, and their overall dedication and commitment to the West Hartford Public Schools. We'd be happy to answer any questions the board has on this agreement.
Thank you so much. Colleagues? Yes, Claire.
Can you just help me understand the professional employees, what titles and what are those roles? I'm not familiar with it.
Sure. I can actually tell you exactly what they are.
I was going to say, Julia can read it. It's a hodgepodge, Claire, of anything from accountants to
account managers,
transportation directors, and so forth.
All housed in this building?
For the most part.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Did you want me to go through those, or?
No.
Yes, Gail.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. I had a couple of questions. What are the steps 1 through 9? I'm assuming that's years worked.
Correct. So, and depending also, it could be if it's a new employee coming in, we would take a look at where they were on that. But ultimately, when anyone is hired within any of our bargaining units, we would place them on one of our steps. So if you look through all of our contracts, or at least virtually all of them, will have some step where an employee is placed on, and every year an employee would move up on that chart until ultimately you reach that top step, and then there would be no more step
So
increase.
is it, you move up every year,
Correct, correct. So if I'm on step 8 this year, at the beginning of next school year, I would be step 9.
Right, and you're also saying not everybody would come in at step 1, it would be somewhat dependent on their level of experience, or?
Correct, correct.
Okay. I just had another couple of questions. On the pension contribution, is that something that's mandated, or does the employee get to choose whether or not they want to contribute to that?
No, that's something that folks that are in the pension plan would have to contribute to.
They have to contribute, so they can't say, hey, I want to contribute half of that? They have to contribute those numbers?
No, correct.
And then if you could just, you said something about $200, which I didn't, is that a yearly thing?
Yes, if you remember, we talked about our longevity plan for some of our employees. So every year when folks hit a certain longevity, and you can see they're all broken down within the contract, and so they wouldn't get that one lump sum. So for instance, our employees that had 15 to 19 years of service, they would receive a $1,000 one-time payment.
Between years 15 through 19?
Correct.
Okay.
Each of those years.
Oh, each of those years?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, right, I see that. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Ethan.
Question for you. How many of the 32 employees, how many are in steps 1 to 9, and is there anything beyond 10, or is 10 the final listing point?
So 10 would be our max step. We have a total, again, of 32 employees. 19 of them are on step 10. So actually answering your question backwards.
Just over half, okay.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, but I figured I'd ask the question, it fits within the budget?
It does, it fits within the budget, we assumed these
Maybe
types.
I should ask.
Yep, no, I appreciate you asking.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? All right, thank you. So I believe we now will take it to vote. And so with that, seeking a motion that the Board of Education ratify the negotiated agreement between the West Hartford Board of Education professional employees and the Board of Education for the period of July 1, 2021 through June 30th, 2024.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. Discussion. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Thank you so very much. Now we shall move on to staff communications and reports. We will now have our superintendent's report.
Thank you. As I mentioned before, and I don't want to go over it again to death, but I do just want to thank all of our teachers. Teacher Appreciation Week. It was also Principal Appreciation Day falls during this week, and just what we know what teachers have done every year, but the past few years especially, during this pandemic and as we come out of the pandemic. And I think that's something that we have to realize. And I think it's important that we celebrate teachers, but with more than thank you, because over the coming years, we're going to see a significant teacher shortage. We had a great career fair, and Giulio and his staff did an unbelievable job bringing in people from universities last week, and it's one of the largest career fairs in the area, and we're one of the few districts that do this, but they already have jobs. The numbers of people and the shortages in this profession are real, and I fear they're going to continue to be real in the coming years. So we need to continue work like Future Educators of Diversity that elevates the profession and elevates the respect that our society has for teachers. So this is a good week to start doing that. And I just want to say I've been so fortunate to have been raised as a teacher in West Hartford, and I say to people all the time when they ask my profession, I say I'm a history teacher on special assignment as a superintendent right now, because teaching is something that's part of your identity, I think. And I think anytime you say what I am, it's part of who you are. So thank you to all of our teachers and the work they do in support of our kids. April 24th to May 1st are Holocaust Remembrance Days. Nationally in West Hartford, we do a lot of work to make sure that's something that Never Forget is constantly talked about, but unfortunately we see enough events in the world that that we could argue that Never Forget is often forgotten. But last election day we did training with our modern world history teachers on Holocaust education and resources, how to teach and how to get the message across. We partnered with UConn for that. We also Conard partnered with UConn in offering genocide studies as a UConn ECE course, so a course that students would get both college credit and of course Conard credit for, as we see other ECE courses, and this is now a pilot. We've been offering genocide studies for the past couple of years. So this is something we're very happy to partner with UConn for, and we actually have a group of students that are not just getting UConn credit, but this is also an opportunity for them to get their mastery certification that we talked about before through genocide studies. So just wanted to point out that as part of our curriculum. And lastly, talking about last week, and I know we talked about it ahead of time that this was coming, but I was so fortunate to be among so many pioneers of the Passing the Torch event last week, celebrating the 50th anniversary of Title IX. And it was at the Hall High School Auditorium, and the participants and their memories of how West Hartford led in the struggle for equity for our females in sports. And we know Title IX isn't just about sports, it's often attributed to sports. But their work to start teams and develop teams and how that happened over time. And it is an example of progress, because sometimes we get caught in the idea that there is not progress. People say it should be the way it used to be. I'm always like, are we sure it should be the way it used to be? Because girls weren't playing sports back then. So that notion of how it uplifted these young women and how their coaches did at the early 8 stages, and we had people that played professional sports and a pilot, and these committees that came forward to talk about in this book that's in my office, and there's one at the town hall now with memories from West Hartford's own pioneers, was greatly appreciated. So it was a great night that I was very fortunate to be a part of. So.
My mic was being defiant, pardon. Oh, let's see. All right. Thank you. Questions in regard to our superintendent's report at all? Comments?
I have a question, actually.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about the teacher shortage, and if we are expecting that to get worse in certain areas over others, what those areas might be?
Special education is going to be dramatic across the state. As we see the needs that are so acute, with social workers, school psychologists, mental health professionals, behavioral therapists, and then you look at how many the universities and colleges are producing, there's not enough to fit that need. And then you look at the fact that there's ESSER funding for all these districts for this year, next year, to hire people in these short-term areas so that there's more jobs than there have been. We've had the benefit of, we've had a robust program. People have wanted to be here. Other places haven't had it. Now there's districts, and you've seen districts offering incentives to stay, year-end incentives that will be paid out next February for their teachers to stay. So this is, the contract we agreed to last November is a good contract, but I can tell you that our special ed teachers are getting called by, I was on the phone with the superintendent today, yelling at him about it's unethical what you're doing with one of our employees. That's during mid-year, trying to pull somebody out of another place isn't appropriate. And we're going to see more and more of that. So that, I would say, is an extreme example. Special education is where we're going to feel it the most.
Thank you.
Claire.
Some of the work is being done to recruit teachers of color through the resident program. Are we participating in that?
We're active participants.
Excellent. And is there any version of that that could be seen in the special ed route? And could that ever be? Because that takes care of two problems. Is there that possibility?
Yeah, those teachers can be brought in through special education, and that's a certification route for them. So that's something that is being done with that. It's a state program, but those are on the margin areas that help. We've got to get 18-year-olds going into education as their field of choice. That's the issue right now.
Unfortunately, with COVID in the last few years and the mental health crisis, not only with students but with teachers, there are more and more people I'm hearing about are leaving the profession, and it's not for retirement, and it's to do some other kind of career that is not so, demanding. And so, what can we do to convince the younger generations to go in a field that is so difficult? Because I've taught for 24 years. I'm not full-time in the classroom. That would be a whole nother job to go to every day, so it's tough.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this that are that could be a book, and I actually am in discussions with another superintendent about co-authoring an article. She's from another part of the country, but the superintendent shortage, because that's the other reality of this. The principal shortage. When you post a principal opening, you're not getting the same number of applicants as you used to with experience, certainly not at all. I think it's an American story, not just a West Hartford story, not a Connecticut story. I think that this is a question about, in Connecticut, overall, we pay teachers well comparatively to other parts of the country. There are places that are, Connecticut, I think, historically is second or third. Massachusetts and Illinois, Maryland's elevated over the past few years, are some of the states, but there are states that don't grant maternity leave for teachers still. So this is a national issue about what is going to entice people into a field, especially if they're going to feel under attack in that field.
Other questions? Ethan?
I don't know if this goes to Tom or goes somewhere else, but I figured it just triggered a memory. I think it was the last meeting, but when we did the budget, we had $200,000 taken away from the sports activity fee, put somewhere else. At what point do we see where that money goes? Or I don't know if this is you, Liz, or...
No, sure. Before the end of the year. So, no, it's a fair question. Let me just... So today we have the meeting with the elementary principals. We had one of the meetings that go through where we're looking at section breaks for next year. So we've got now that the budget is passed, everything's kind of on hold till the budget passes. And then we go through at the high schools and we start really, okay, you guys run your schedules, because there's going to be what we say, and then there's going to be, but we need another math section here because this didn't. So there's always that kind of give and take. The elementary levels, then we get the sections done. But the sections, then we have to break down with all the specials and who's going to be at what school. So all those things have to go together. And then we begin the allocation, not just of who's historically been at schools for special education, but what the unique needs are next year. And so it's an analysis that goes through what are the needs, where is it going to be. So before the end of the year, I might have more information on March 17th, certainly on June 1st. I'd share that information about where that looks like in terms of exactly where it's going.
We'll get a chance to see it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Just sort of out of sight, out of mind.
No, we'll have to do that anyway with the ESSER funding, any shifts. So that's something that is, you would have to sign, we'll make the changes, but we have to make them publicly before we send them in to the state and federal government. All right, thank you. No problem.
Other questions or comments? All right, Tom, thank you so very much. Now, staff reports and board discussions. I don't believe we have any. We've had lots already. Let's move on to routine matters. Financial report, approval of the financial report for the period ending March 31st, 2022. And so we have Liz, thank you for coming, and I believe Deb is going to be giving the update today.
Thank you. And this is the report, as our good chairperson just indicated, for the period ending March 31st, so just about a month ago. And it looks very similar to the report that we received last month. We have a little bit higher of an estimated surplus, about $110,000, but this is, again, in a budget the size of ours, just essentially a rounding error. So nothing terribly notable there. If you turn to page 7, the general fund report, I'll just highlight a couple of items. The teacher salary line item, you'll see a balance there, and that's largely just reflective of hiring teachers at a lower rate, less experience than we had anticipated. We also had a couple of teachers leave in the middle of the year and replaced with less experienced teachers. Call your attention to the teacher substitutes and teacher assistants lines, 5180 and 5185. So you'll see we have large balances there, and this is the same trend we've been seeing all year of difficulty filling those positions. And then this is reflected in the all other purchased services line, where we have overexpended by a little over 1.5 million. And that is due to utilizing staffing agencies for some of the needs that we've been unable to fill with our own hires. Turning to our state and federal grants fund report on the next page, you'll see several grants listed there that typically would be one-year grants that we've actually had some extensions on. We're probably going to carry forward about $11 million from this year into the next fiscal year, and those are largely, you can see the largest grant balances, and we will spend all this money, so no worries about that. The largest balances you'll see are account 502236, which is Title I Public, Improving Basic Skills. 502252, this is the IDEA Part B, Section 611 Public, and 502264, it's another IDEA grant that we will plan to expend over the next year or so. And just as a reminder, if you look towards the bottom of the page, we have the ESSER grants, and I always just like to remind people what the deadlines are for each of these. So ESSER 1, which is 502062, that grant must be expended by this September 30th, and you'll see that we have no grant balance that we estimate to bring forward to next year. ESSER 2, just a couple of lines up, we have until September 30th of 23, and ESSER 3, we have until September 30th of 24, and so for both of those, we are going to plan to carry money forward into the next year, but we will definitely utilize those prior to their expiration. Turning to the next page, our special funds report. This looks largely the same as it has all year. The one item we're just kind of keeping an eye out on is instrument rental. And you'll see that we do project a loss in this line item this year, and this is mostly due to fewer strings rentals coming through the schools, that people are using an outside service to rent their strings instruments mostly. So we'll just kind of keep an eye on that. Not to worry though, because these funds can be covering that loss there. So the extra money we're getting in from other grants and from our interest on investments will cover that loss, but just something for us to be aware of. And finally, nutrition services, page 10. We are serving a lot of meals, and so that is really good news. The fund has a nice healthy balance, and I think we've mentioned before that we will be utilizing some of the extra funds to replace dishwashers and stoves this summer, so we can refresh the equipment in the schools, make sure they're energy efficient and working as best as they can. We also just need to be aware that it appears extremely likely that the free breakfast and lunch program is going to end This year, there's just not been a lot of movement on the federal level to extend that. And so we're likely to see this fund change a lot next year once people need to start paying for lunches again. So we'll have to keep an eye on that and also make sure that our families do fill out the free and reduced lunch forms for next year. These haven't been as important over the past couple of years because everybody's been getting free lunch. But starting in the fall, we presume that people will have to start paying again. So we want to make sure that our families are making use of the free and reduced lunch if available to them. So that is the report, and happy to take any questions or pass them on to Liz.
Claire?
I just have a question. I was worried about this free and reduced lunch ending. Is there any way to be proactive and reach out to families during this school year about this need to apply? And the reason is, over the summer, families don't always check things, they travel, and then they show up at school expecting free lunch. So I'm, through counseling, through communication, I really hope that there's something very proactive in the month of May and June so that our families know.
I would say June. We wouldn't be able to do it yet because not every budget is finalized at this point, so we don't want to have to walk back. We do, I will say this is something that I think our principals and the onboarding do a tremendous work with, especially with our new students and bring them in. And you're right, Claire, we'll have to bring it back middle and high school for people that have already been here and do extra reach out, and we certainly will. I just want to make sure we don't send mixed messages. I'm 95% sure of the way this is going, but there's still a 5% chance.
And the other thing I would mention is that although our percentage as a whole has dropped, so last year we reported, I believe it was 27% free and reduced lunch as a total of our total population, and we're down to 25% this year. So basically we lost perhaps 2%. So we are actively still sending information out to those families. We do a mass mailing to all families in the beginning of the year, but I don't want to give the impression that we went from 27% and now need to start over again. We saw a drop, but it's not a lot of students, and we will do everything we can to get their forms back in.
Yeah, so I would assume that 2% will come back. And
Yes.
I would even
It will be
gather
even
that we're
more.
going to get 3% more.
Exactly.
And so do we have the budget and the funding in the first couple weeks of schools to feed?
We do.
So those kids will not go without lunch, but
No.
families can get some catch-up time in the first couple weeks of September to get their financial information in.
Exactly.
Okay.
There's kind of a grace period there, and we never refuse a student a meal.
It doesn't matter when it is, whether it's September, whether it's November, January. If a child needs to eat, they're going to eat at our schools.
Yes.
Other questions, comments? All right, thank you. So let us now, rather, seeking a motion that the Board of Education approve the financial report for the period ending March 31st, 2022.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Ethan. Is there a second?
Second, Jason.
Thank you, Jason. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Deb. Now, on to approval of the minutes. Approval of the minutes of the April 19th, 2022 regular Board of Education meeting. Seeking a motion, please.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you so very much. On to information and reports. Board members, communications and reports. Do we have any reports from other boards and organizations?
I'm sorry, just one thing. Lauren,
Sure.
if you could, don't you have a report from the History Day Board from the state? I just got a notice of something. Is that to be shared?
She doesn't know. Look at the.
Eleanor Farquhar, I didn't know if you had gotten this. took first place in her performance division at history. She'll be going to nationals. And I didn't know if you had all of that information, so.
So I am happy for her. She's not my
I
child.
know, I just saw Eleanor F.
Yeah. No, that's all right. But thank you for sharing. No, that's all right. She is a student of ours nonetheless, so proud of her.
Going to National history.
Awesome. Eleanor, proud of you. The National History Day on Saturday, which I attended, was wonderful. My daughter was there representing. So glad for Eleanor and the other students also. So a round of applause for Eleanor, please. Yes. That is awesome. Thank you. Any other reports from boards? Yes, Jason.
Yeah, just wanted to give a shout out for May. May is Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and there's a number of community events that happen around the state, and encourage folks to look for those and to celebrate. One of the interesting parts of the calendar is that this is also a legislative session. And we have a bill in the legislature bringing Asian American Pacific Islander studies to K through 12 education. Very appropriate that it's on the floor during API month. So, thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Good information, absolutely. Other updates from boards at all, or comments? All right, I want to make sure I don't do what I did the last time. Now we certainly want to hear from our student representatives. So beginning with Avery, please.
So AP exams began yesterday, and they will continue all the way through next week. After that, we will have a short period of time before we begin finals. Tickets for Medea Hall's Greek Tragedy of the Year are currently out. There will be performances at 7 p.m. on May 19th, 20th, and 21st, and a matinee at 2 p.m. on May 21st as well. On May 7th, the junior prom will be happening. Tickets have been sent out, and students are very excited to get back to prom. Rita's came to raise funds for Safe Grad for our seniors, which was also an incredibly popular event. I saw people walking around the school with their little cups of shaved ice and running out to get that during their free periods. The Environmental Club had a visit from the Girl Scouts. They planted vegetables in our garden. We have a compost, a burgeoning compost program with worms. And the Girl Scouts participated in feeding these worms and taking care of them. And they also learned the basics about worms. So this was a nice opportunity for our older students to connect with younger kids. Sarah Antoine received the Marjorie Little Award for Academic Excellence. This is an award awarded by CRAC of a $1,000 prize. Gabe Sisk, Walker Beverly, Jamie Rendon, and Sean McDaniel of boys track will be advancing to the championship race, and a new school record for the 1,600 meter relay was set recently at the Penn race, yes. And to commemorate what used to be known as Title IX, well, is still well known by that. Hall and Conard artists have been presenting an exhibit in the front of Hall, which honors key members in pursuing gender equality, which includes Patsy Mink, who the act was later renamed after. And this artistic project includes short biographies that I've been seeing students stopping to read and learn about these figures in our history.
Avery, thank you. And I have to say, I've seen what is in the lobby at Hall. It's beautiful in terms of the artwork highlighting that. So thank you so much for your update. Thank you. Andrew.
I'll just go chronologically, starting with 2 weeks ago. Conard had a lot of activities related to Earth Day, and we kind of had a whole week out of it, actually. At Conard, we have a very robust environmental club. And something that was started last year was something we're calling the Earth Day Project. So they decorated the school, and that was up all week. The Conard Current, our school newspaper, also put out a special issue of the newspaper solely about Earth Day and environmentalism, and also the Earth Day Club in tandem with or the Environmental Club in tandem with the Earth Day Project, put out information the entire week via social media and physically in the school. Last week, Conard's music department put on the Broadway concert. And also, last week, Chris Herron came and spoke on Tuesday. And then the following day, on Wednesday, Community Block was spent debriefing over his discussion of substance abuse. And I'm not sure if how familiar everyone here is with him, but definitely a very powerful story. I've heard it a few times, actually. This week, as Mr. Moore noted, is Teacher Appreciation Week. So the administration has been doing things to show their appreciation every day. I think either at some point there's going to be a breakfast. I know there was lattes were served to the teachers. But Mr. Hines stressed definitely for everyone, including and especially the teachers, this has been a very difficult year. So just showing really how appreciative we are, and as a student, how appreciative I am. I'm definitely very. Next week and this week, we're having AP exams. Those end Friday, and then makeups are the following week or two. But the vast majority of students are taking them these 2 weeks. And then just looking forward to the rest of spring, Conard's drama department is also putting on a Greek tragedy, but we're putting on Eurydice. So stay tuned for that. Posters just went up, and that will be happening in a few weeks.
Thank you, Andrew. I love the nonverbal communication there. Good. Thank you so much, both of you, for your updates. And thank you as well for emphasizing again how this is Teacher Appreciation Week. That is certainly, I think, collectively, I can speak on behalf of the board. We certainly appreciate all of the teachers, all that you do for educating, serving as role models, empowering our young people. We certainly know on our board we are appreciative to educators that we have. Claire and Jason, thank you so very much for your role and what you do. We certainly need you teachers, so thank you, thank you. Young people, again, thank you so much for your updates. Now, moving on to future business, announcement of future meeting dates. We have the next one on Tuesday, May the 17th, a regular Board of Education meeting at 7 o'clock here at the Town Hall, room 314. And then the last meeting for the year, the academic year that is, Tuesday, June the 7th, 2022, regular Board of Education meeting, 7 o'clock here at the Town Hall in room 314. Is there a request for a future agenda item? Seeing none. Do we have any comments that would like to be made? Yes, please. If you could come to the podium and please share your name and your address.
My name is Casey Rousseau, 85 Fenbrook Road. I don't want to keep you guys any later. I had put my name down to talk about social emotional learning. I want to thank the board for their leadership in establishing a curriculum of social emotional learning. There have been a number of people who have commented here tonight and on previous occasions that in their opinion, 5-year-olds are too young to learn about gender identity. It seems to me they have completely forgotten the Lord of the Flies levels of education they were subjected to on the school playgrounds, hallways, and classrooms of their youth. In my recollection, any perceived deviation from traditional gender norms subjected a child to harsh correction from their peers and, in many cases, the adults entrusted with their care. People ask for parents to have the option to opt out of these curriculums. I say that if a child is old enough to understand the terms of boy and girl, they are old enough to understand that those terms don't neatly fit every child in the stereotypical way. Our students need to learn how to interact with the world around them in productive and respectful ways. And finally, I want to offer my warm appreciation to the board for listening with equanimity to much of the abuse that was heaped from this pulpit. I don't know how you do it. You do it with grace, and it is very saddening for somebody to hear fellow members of this community denigrating you and your work. And I appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you. We had here also on the list, once we reached the cap from before, get you, but I do believe you did speak, yes. You haven't, okay, yes, on gender, okay.
Good evening. My name is Getch again. My address is 56 Gillette Street. I'm here to speak about the gender identity curriculum being implemented in West Hartford Public Schools. First, some historical background I need to discuss about. On June 5, 1981, the world came to know about an outbreak of unusually aggressive cancer called Kaposi sarcoma. This terrifying news was first published in the CDC Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. Immunologist Dr. Michael Gottlieb, CDC's Dr. Wayne Chandra, and Dr. Alvin Friedman Kane confirmed the discovery of this deadly epidemic, which specifically attacks the immune system in only gay men. Even a weekly report, a weekly newspaper for the gay and lesbian community in San Francisco called the Bay Area Reporter, published its first mention of gay men's pneumonia in July 2, 1981. This is like within less than a month of the outbreak. The newspaper encouraged gay men who are experiencing shortness of breath to see their physicians. This pandemic was rightly called then by the doctors as a gay-related immune deficiency, or GRID. Before the great Dr. Fauci, who was the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, renamed it to HIV/AIDS to cover up the source. Within 7 months of the outbreak, the first community-based AIDS service provider in the U.S. was founded in New York City. The center was called Gay Men's Health Crisis, or GMHC. This HIV cancer was introduced by a white gay man, was intentionally made to spread across the globe, and in the continent of Africa, became by far the greatest victim of it. The black race was targeted by this evil and wiped out, and Africa lost 27 million people to HIV/AIDS since 1982. Over 76 million are now living with HIV, consuming a daily dose of HIV drug cocktail. To add insult to injury, this racist group, turned around and accused the black race as a source of the pandemic. They blamed him for eating monkey that has AIDS and then transferring it to the white man. This theory was pulled out of thin air by white liberals like Dorothy Crawford, who wrote a fictitious book called Virus Hand. As if that is not damaging enough to the global community, the white progressive leftists that dominated our public school system.
Your time has expired.
Okay, I'm finished. Public school system are now trying hard to our kids.
Excuse me, sir, your time has expired. Thank you. Thank you. We also had on the list from before Ann Beers or Boers. Is she still here? No. Okay. And David and Ella Goldberg. Is there anyone else here who would like to make a comment? Please come to the podium.
Cindy Gothier, 44 Manchester Circle. And I would just like to follow up on the school mascot issue and just say that my impression of the last meeting when Mr. Goldman asked for someone to come and speak to us, to educate, that it was kind of like lip service, like your mind has already been made up. and nothing was going to change it. And I just hope that that's not the case, because I really appreciate the fact that he took his time tonight to educate all of us. And I would hope it would mean more than just lip service, because I am coming on my 40th reunion this year of Conard, and I can tell you that the majority of my classmates from 40 years ago are so upset about this and don't think our mascot name should be taken away. And for us to have that feeling this many years later, I think says a lot. And I really think we need to reconsider and not push this through. And I understand that 30% are offended by it, but like the chief said, not everyone's going to be pleased with every decision. And the 30% is clearly the minority. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? One last time. All right. With that, we do not have an executive session. And I feel compelled to just share a quote before we depart or seek an adjournment. I certainly know that we are here certainly to talk about board matters, talk about our district matters, educating our young people. I just want to remind us the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education." So again, I'm honored to serve with all of you as we continue to do what we are here to do in that charge. And with that, seeking a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Meeting adjourned at 9:50.